and just make sure that I don't create an unrealistic expectation for myself because I just don't want to stop the progress.
So my 2025 goals are based around a weekly plan that I'm going to execute on.
Like, what else have I been missing out on because I've just programmed myself 10 years ago not to do this? How you feeling, big guy?
That's the wrong first question.
I know. Look at the Boston Cup, ready to go. One of the things that's been on my mind heavily, which coincides with the comment that you were just making, was like ensuring, like when you talked about having a goal and then building your week to surround that goal, right? So one of the things that I wrote down, and I didn't really connect the dots until you said it that way, but it's really actually why I feel better, was like the way I look at like mindset, right? You've got the physical world, you've got your mind or your head, then you've got your heart, right? So like I'll just call it the triangle for a second. All of those have got to connect, right, in order for you to reach your goals. So, and that's been heavily on my mind, and that's why I sold my car. It wasn't about selling the car. It was more about like trying to ensure that what I was doing physically, mentally, and spiritually is aligning with the end result, right? And there was no need for that. So, and trying to make more decisions that are congruent, right? And I think Bedros talks about it a lot, and he uses that word, right? But just trying to be super congruent with what I'm actually trying to do, because we've got dreams and we have reality, right? And I think a lot of us dream, and we'll continue to dream, but we're not really taking actions to them. Like, we're partially taking actions to the dreams, right? We're working, we're saving money, whatever it is, but then we still have those crutches for the short-term goal versus long-term goal, or short-term gain versus long-term gain, right? Where we have that comfort. We have a car, or we have a toy that we invest into a lot that can actually take away momentum or energy from that end result. So to me, that's what 2025 has been around, which is funny that what you said resonates with me right now.
Just for the record, we were talking before we recorded all of this, and essentially, just to sum it all up, is the 2025 goals that I have are not actually goals. It's an action plan. So I have a 2025 action plan. I sat down and figured what I wanted to achieve in the next year. Very realistic, very short-sighted. Not in terms of development plan, but in terms of 100% achievable goal, right? My goal is not to become a millionaire this year. It is to make X amount of dollars that is fairly reasonable, or let's say a 20%, 30% increase in what I did over the previous year. So something realistic. In terms of physical goals, there is a set metric, a set amount of weight that I want to be able to move, lift, become a certain level, but it is reasonable to what I have achieved over the last couple of years. And to make that plan of action, what I did was very simply, what am I willing to do on a weekly basis? So my 2025 goals are based around a weekly plan that I'm going to execute on. And it's not drastically different from what I've been doing over the previous years because I've already been doing it. So I didn't add anything new. I didn't add anything that I need to become a complete different person to achieve. It is very simply continuing the path that I'm already on. And those are way that I base my goals on. And that's kind of what he's talking about. In terms of what you actually just mentioned, though, I do want to talk about it for a second because it is actually pretty interesting. I call them brain farts, lapses in judgment that don't get you where you want to go. Either, that shiny object, or you have been working for 6 or 7 months and now the new thing, I got a new phone, right? So it's been 6 years since I got a new phone. Like, I had an iPhone 10 and this came out in 2019, 20.
Let me ask you this. I just need to know, did you stop updating it so it could run better, or did you continue to update it?
It's been updating perfectly fine. Haven't had any issues with the battery. It makes it through most of the day. 2 issues that I had with it. One was like 6 or 7 months ago. The Face ID stopped working and I just continued putting the password in. And then, well, it's not even an issue, but even then, using it outside in the bright sun, it would get hot and the screen would dim because it was too hot. So that would happen occasionally. But the actual reason that I got a new phone is because the charger port broke. So I couldn't charge my phone.
No, that's good. I just, for me, like lately, right? And I think this kind of coincides with the conversation, but it goes slightly deeper, is just the fact that, like, when you find things that you like, you'll hold on to them, right? And for me, overcoming a lot of things over the past 10 years as I've developed and grown, like to your point, I like the shiny objects sometimes, so I would upgrade frequently. But then there also comes a time when you truly like something, right? And you just want to hold
Yeah.
on to it. And there's a lot more things lately that I find that I truly like that I'm like, I want to hold on to this forever, right? Or for as long as I can. Where back then, a lot of it too was that, I never spent money on the things that I actually wanted, but I try to get close to it, right? So like for example, and I'll just small example, I always wanted the bigger pro firm, right? Always wanted it. I never really got it. So I had to upgrade to the smaller pro because it was cheaper, or I just wouldn't get the pro at all. And I would just get the basic model, right? I was never truly happy with it. But I settled. So trying to find a balancing line of like, hey, where do you settle at, right? And where's settling necessary for the betterment of your future? And then where are things that, hey, like if you buy it and you get what you actually want, whether you save for it, strategically plan for it, whatever it may be, there's going to be a different sense of joy out of it, right? And you're more likely to retain or find fulfillment or find joy in whatever you're doing, right? And that's physical, something as an object or doing something that you're specifically trying to do or accomplish. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's just how I feel lately, dude. And maybe that's just coming in with time, right? Wisdom and age. But to your point, I'll call it a brain fart, right? I think there's a need for that sometimes, only because life is short, man, and there's so many conflicting podcasters that are out there, and they'll tell you, you know, entrepreneurs and podcasters, right? Whomever it is, and you have to discern what's legit, what's not legit, what's going to work for you, and what's not, right? Based on like, hey, man, you just need to like hustle and save like a motherfucker, right? But what if there's also those that will discuss like you could die at any given time. So like, and I don't mean that morbidly, but like you got to find a sense of joy in your life right now. And there's joy, there's gratitude, there's a couple different things that coincide with that as well. But like, you don't want to like fucking grind with no joy, right? So you have to find a lot of balance in that. And that's where I've been trying to find balance as of late, is like short-term gains, spiritual, mental, physical, right? And then long-term gains. And where does one find balance in that decision to ensure that that dream still becomes a reality and not just stay a dream?
Yeah, and we had this conversation. I don't remember what episode it was, but we really did have this conversation in terms of it was actually something that I was thinking about and heavily about it is rewards and where do those get built in? And it's probably been now like 4 or 5 months, but I do actually have a better idea of what that is and what I want that to be for me. So these, let's call them lapses in judgment, right? Either they're your monkey brain. They're kind of just like an instinctive, like, oh, I want it and get it. And because you can, right? And there's not much second level thought or higher level thought in terms of what comes out of it. But on the backside of that, I have come up with a very interesting thing for myself. And this is kind of what I'm going to do this year moving forward in terms of an actual reward system. Because at the end of the day, like when you work, you want something, right? It doesn't matter what it is. But for me, it's not going to be in terms of like when I take action. But for example, for me, since I work a little bit differently, obviously I don't have a paycheck that comes in every 2 weeks. I'm going to do it based on what comes in. Right. So it'll be a small percentage of something that comes in. Right. So if I get a $5,000 check, it's going to be very different than a $25,000 check. And what I do with a certain amount of money is going to be based on, I don't know, probably like 5% of whatever it is that I receive. So if I get $1,000 check, it looks like I'm going to get some ice cream. Right. If I get a $50,000 check, it looks like I can actually go out and maybe spend $1,000 or go out and have a little vacation, go to Orlando, go to a theme park, something along those lines, to where it's proportional to the amount of money that's coming in, but it's going to be percentage based. So that way it's not something that is completely out of the ordinary. So let's say I get a $5,000 check from Elise. I'm not going to go out and spend $1,500 on going to Orlando, right? To go to Disney. But that is something that's perfectly acceptable. If I make, 50 grand and I close a deal and I get 50 grand, like that's perfectly reasonable for that. So it's just going to be based upon whatever it is. And even if it's like, dude, sometimes I get like a renewal check for like $200 or $300 to where it's nothing crazy. I can't really do too much with it, but instead of spending that on something, I'll go to the gas station and get like a candy or something, right? Something proportional to that. So if I get $300, I'll spend $30 dollars on something, right? I might go out, watch a movie, something random to where it's proportional to what it is. And I'm going to limit myself to rewarding myself in that way. That way it's congruent with what it is that I want to achieve. It's not anything that's going to set back, and it's still something that can be planned without it being specifically planned, right? Because I don't know the dollars that are going to come in,
Right.
but if I have that set up, I know that like, hey, look, this was something that was small. It may have taken me 2 or 3 hours. Therefore, I now can have a little bit of sugar, right? I'll go out, have some candy, have some ice cream, something along those lines. That way it's like reasonable, proportionable, doesn't set me back, but it's still satisfying. It is still something that I want, right? So it's a reward. It literally fits everything, but it's just not one of those like, hey, look, I made $200. Now I'm going to go spend 400 on something, right?
No. I think finding a reward system, right? Whatever works for you is absolutely mission critical, right? And then I think what you said, I think that's probably pretty key is that you plan it a little bit. Like you're intentional about that thought process from a reward perspective, where many people don't, so they don't really think through it. It's more or less instant gratification. And I think, when you really start talking about like discipline and making decisions to be a little bit more disciplined, I think somebody said like, the true definition of discipline is the ability to delay, instant or short-term gratification for the long-term goal, right? And making those decisions, but in the same breath, some people it works where you have to be a savage about it, right? And that may work for you, but some people it just may be, one more decision a day. That's something small that will compound over time, and I think that's important to note. Like discipline is anecdotal, right? From a mindset perspective, based on where you're at in your journey and what decisions you're trying to make. So I just think it's critical to your point. Like there's got to be some coherence in between like what you're trying to accomplish long term and short term, right? And I think some of us have got to make big decisions. And for me, my big decision was doing that. Like there was just no need for it. And it was less about the financial impact, but more about the personal impact. Right? Just to let go of that keeping up with the Joneses mentality, or from a societal perspective, for some people, it just won't make a lot of sense to, right? Like, why did you do it? Or, why are you making that decision? Why are you choosing that route? Live a little, have fun. Like there's a lot of outside noise and outside pressure into that conversation, man. So, for me, it's all about momentum. It's all about energy, right? And being intentional.
Yeah.
And it's all about being different this year, right? And I think we all talk about that, but I like your terminology and the way you're phrasing a little bit more. It's more or less an action plan, right? Not goals, because goals, everybody's got goals, dude, in some way, shape, or fashion, right? But nobody's taking action on them. And that's something you hear about a lot in work in the professional landscape, where people are very good at writing detailed plans, but taking action is the other part of it, right? And we're all trying to look for like the best way to enter the numbers or enter into the game. But there is no good way, bro. You just got to take action and get in the fucking game and figure it out, right? So that's where I'm at this year, man. I feel really good about it. I feel really good about the conversation that we had when I was in Jacksonville in November, thinking through some of the goals and actions that I wanted to take into 2025, and that's where I'm at. And for me, that was my first big action for January, was making that decision. I got to think through the next big action in February, right? So, and just make sure that I'm taking steps towards the end game. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. So are you, just from the fact that you said you took a big action in January, you said that you were going to take something in February, are you aiming to do something to move you in the right direction once a month? Is that like a...
Yeah,
like
I feel like that's
you're going on?
realistic. I feel like that's realistic, man. Like I feel like sometimes, and I think we've talked about this on previous episodes, I think that we as ambitious individuals, right? For anybody who's thinking through next steps in your life, sometimes we set too high of expectations sometimes, right? And I've been on this kick for a couple of years, and sometimes it frustrates me and sometimes it doesn't. Where it's like, man, like don't create unrealistic expectations for yourself, because essentially it kind of goes back to that whole atomic habit mindset. Like you've got to habit stack. We've got to make good stacking of our decisions, right? And I think sometimes if you think about goals or resolutions, however you want to quantify it, like you're expecting too much from yourself, and then if you don't create any momentum, it's going to easily be shut down. So if I can look at, okay, I've got 12 decisions that I've got to make this year, right? That are going to lead me to my end goal, then I'm going to take one a month. right? And they're going to be somewhat big moves. Like it's not going to be. I'm still going to continue my small habits, right, from a physical perspective, stuff like that. But like I want to make one big move a month, some way, shape, or form. And big is I define big, right, not the outside world, but that's the way I'm thinking right now.
No, that makes perfect sense. That's awesome. That's kind of something along the lines of what I was thinking. But for me, it was adding something to the habit list, right? Just one new action that's going to get me in the right direction, whether that be uh, like, honestly, I haven't thought too deeply into what those things can be, but just one new habit, whatever it is, one new thing, whether that be a specific go to sleep time, drop something, just one change, because you can focus on that. You can do that. Even if it's just like simply wake up in the morning. And one of the things that I've been is smiling, literally smiling, because I sit like this in front of a computer all day, right? So I can feel it. I feel it in my face. I feel it here. I feel it. So I have to wake up in the morning and like stretch it out a little bit, right? Get the face muscles moving. So something as simple as that is an action that I haven't taken. There's a reason for it. It sets my face up in a certain position. But actually, if you've ever done it before, if you actually sat down and literally smiled, you feel better after doing it. Like just sit there 10 minutes, 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. It's weird. No one's looking at you. Just do it when you're by yourself. But you actually
No, I
feel
agree with
better
that.
in general just doing that. Then you add the posture, right? Now it becomes something that's a little bit different, but you have to focus on detail number one first. And for me, that's going to be a lot of the body focus. What's my face doing? What's my body doing? How am I standing? How are my feet on the ground? There's a lot of postural things that I need to address. And that's part of the, add those as a habit type thing for me.
Something it kind of goes back with what I just said, I can loop it into like right? I call that the 1% mindset or 1% compound interest effect, right? There's a whole
Mhm.
case study on what 1% compound interest can do for you. So like when you look at for me, and this is a blessing and a curse, right? So like I made a commitment a couple of years ago to like be more physically active, right? But for in my prior life, I've always been athletic and I've always played sports. I've always ran on some way, shape, or form. But like I've always wanted to say, hey, I'm gonna get fit, right? And I'm going to start working out. I'm going to lift weights. And then I set too high of expectations for myself mentally, and I easily would tap out. So for the past few years, I've tried to remove that expectation for myself. And it's like, hey, dude, I just want to be physically active, right? I'm not doing it for the gain in terms of like trying to look like, like fucking somebody unrealistic, right? I just know from a health perspective that I need to be active in some way, shape, or form, right? So when I changed my mindset, it allowed me to change my culture for myself personally. And I have, like, I'm not like 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, every single week, but like there are weeks that I'll work out 5 days in a row. And then there's weeks that I'll work out 2 or 3 times, right? But I'm pretty consistent in terms of that I'm working out constantly. I'm doing something, whether I go running, whether I'm doing, just random push-ups on the floor because I'm like, dude, I got to do something today, or I'm going to, the gym when I'm traveling or at home, right? So like I've done pretty good at that for the past few years, right? The blood or the curse for that for me is that because I haven't defined specific goals, almost because there's like a paranoia about them, that I've slowed down in my progression. So, and that's another thing that I've kind of thought through this year is that like I've got to not be scared of setting certain expectations for myself in terms of that because of a past experience that I was never able to capitalize on and continue to move the goalpost back because I'm super proud of myself that I've been very consistent on my working out, right? And my progress. I know that if I were to say 3 years ago, I could do 10 push-ups. Now I can do 50 without stopping, right? So like I know there's been progress, but like I've also hit a plateau where it's just like, all right, dude, the difference in 2025 is that I've got to continue, I've got to move the goalpost a little bit further, and just make sure that I don't create an unrealistic expectation for myself because I just don't want to stop the progress. I mean, and that comes down to there's a lot of terminology that just says like just keep chopping wood, don't look back, right? Just keep going, whatever the progress is, 1%, 10%, 50%. So I'm really trying to gravitate and latch onto that. Like I'm making progress every day, every week. It may not be as fast as what some would like to see. In some areas, it is very fast, right? And that's where you have to balance like your professional life, your personal life, your mental mindset, right? Your spirituality, and your relationships around you. Like, and that goes back to that whole Matthew McConaughey bucket thing that I always reference to. Like, we've all got buckets that we have to fill, and like we're going to go into the red on them somewhere in some time. Like you just have to notice it, take notice, and try to find balance. It's impossible to be 100% balanced and perfect on all levels, right? In all 5 buckets. But for me this year, it's like, okay, dude, like I got to play a little bit more intense ball in all my buckets, right? I've got to be more intentional and intense on a personal level, on a professional level, on a physical level, on a mental level, and on a spiritual level, and a relationship level. Like I have to, like we got to move it a little bit faster now. Because at some point in time, after you build those habits, to your point, and you build those, I just call them, I don't want to say core muscles, right? But the support muscles around the habits and the foundation that you're trying to create. It's like, okay, I've got the foundation, I've got the support, like I need to start stacking faster, right? And that's where I'm at. So that's why it's like I got to make some different decisions this year, dude. And I feel good about it. I feel good mentally. I feel good with the way the first few weeks have started, and where I'm at, right? I just feel like I'm in a really good sweet spot, and I'm going to leverage it as best I can. And then you also have to prepare for the obstacle. Like what's the unknown that's going to come your way? Because there's going to be one. And that's essentially everything that I've been training myself to do for a long time, dude. Like I finally feel, if you want to put it in athlete terms, like I feel really good. Like I'm in my prime, I guess you could say. And I know it's hard to, like, from an ego perspective, I don't mean that like, hey, I'm in my prime as in I'm the best I've ever been. Like I don't mean that. But like I feel really good with, everything that we do in life is just a journey, right? And the reading, the podcast, the influence, the mindsets, the meditations, the adversity, like I feel really, really good, dude. And it's time to capitalize off that and get a really big burst, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
I'm pumped up. I'm jacked up.
One thing
now.
that I wrote down while you were talking is elevate the baseline.
Elevate the baseline. That's a perfect quote. I could have summed up that entire conversation in those 3 words.
Well, no, I had to listen to all you had to say to think that down. But seriously, that is something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about, because I found myself last year feeling, we talked about it a little bit, but like down, like I wasn't doing enough, because during baseball season, I decided to not work out as much. It ended up working out amazingly for me, because I found out that when I work out, I can't throw the same, because my body's recovering from, working out. So I have to schedule workouts a little bit differently to make it work. But either way, that made me feel like I wasn't making progress, like I wasn't getting stronger, even though I was able to maintain the weight that I was able to lift. I was able to maintain the muscle mass. I didn't change very much, but internally I felt like I wasn't doing enough, because I used to go to the gym 5 days a week, and I was really only in the gym like a day, 2 days. And one of those 2 days was like a rather chill, relaxed kind of cardio type day. But in reality, what ended up happening was I found alternatives to exercise. So I wasn't in the gym lifting weights every day, but we were out walking. I was going on 4-mile walks, 3-mile walks, 3 to 4 times a week, and working out those 1 or 2 days. So it's not that I wasn't actually working out. I just wasn't in the gym, right? I didn't have the pump. I didn't have the little puffy chest from bench pressing every day, because obviously your body changes when you lift once a week versus when you don't lift once a week. So I was seeing those results, but it's not that I wasn't making progress, and it's not that I wasn't making progress in the right direction. I was just doing it a little bit differently, right? I didn't consider a 4-mile walk an exercise, but it is, right? Because now my legs are better. I have more stamina. We've been riding bikes too. So I was thinking that I wasn't going to the gym every day, because I wasn't actually going to the gym every day. But in reality, I was still working out 4 or 5 days a week, just a little bit differently. So being able to adjust and kind of still continue with that baseline of I'm still able to work out 4 or 5 days a week, but it may look a little bit different, is also something that you do have to get used to as you're kind of working out, right? So whatever that is, just because you're not lifting weights doesn't mean you're not working out. And that's something that's interesting for me, because my brain's always associated lifting weights with working out. Cardio, for some reason, for me, just wasn't working out, but it is. And it's just something that you need to do regardless. So that's also pretty interesting. Just something
crazy.
Yeah.
So something that I picked up 2 weeks ago, like I stopped reading for a little bit, other than my meditations book.
Mm-hmm.
I just stopped reading for a while just because of content, right? And just trying to like recalibrate my mindset, because I just felt like everything's so redundant. So I picked up a book a few weeks ago. Don't believe everything you think, man. So when you think about like, what I think we've talked about this before, but like things that you just don't do because, your body or your mind said don't do it, right? There's just so many things that I found as I've grown over time that have changed, right? My palate for food has changed, right? For example, like I never ate onions. I still don't like eating vegetables, but I just started eating onions, right? Just weird shit that I've just never paid attention to. That I'm like, I'm gonna try this again, right? To see if there's a different take on it, and things are starting to shift, right? So then it almost makes you question, like, what else have I been missing out on because I've just programmed myself 10 years ago not to do this or think this way, accept this, whatever it is, taste this, eat this. So I've just been trying to think through that, and so that title of that book really kind of hit home. And Heather's been saying it for a long time, like and then I watched that Aaron Rodgers documentary. I think I told you about that, and the mindset of what he was trying to do to unprogram himself based on societal norms, right? And there's just so many things in life that we even down to like the history that we were taught in school, like it may or may not be true, dude. Like, how do we know? It was written 200 years ago, 300 years ago from a point of view who could, swing left or swing right or is really neutral, right? Or swing in some different direction. And so everything is a matter of perspective and point of view, and it's all been recorded, but hasn't been recorded accurately, right? Because the definition of good and bad was made up, right versus wrong was made up, and we all know those things that we shouldn't do, right? So don't kill, don't steal, stuff like that. But like, there's a lot of things that we as a society and we as a culture have made, and we've just followed it blindly, right? And we're taught that way in school by our parents. So really going back to that, don't believe everything you think mindset and trying to undo some of those things down to like the very fiber of how you're woven is pretty interesting, right? So that's what's kind of led into, for me, 2025, January 2025. It's like, okay, like don't believe it just because you think it or just because you know it to be true based on the past, however many years you've been alive. Stop for a second and start questioning it and have a natural curiosity as to why you do or do not do something, like something, or prefer something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Honestly, it's just a matter of like being open to it too. That takes a little bit of reflection though. Honestly, it's a tough situation because conceptually we know that, we understand that, but you also have to correlate that to an internal feeling of something that causes you to recognize that situation. So for me, with the workout thing, it was a feeling of like I'm not doing enough or I'm not going in the direction that I want to go. And it took me a minute to sit back. Is that true? Right. So a lot of the times there's a feeling that people don't want to reach for to ask that question.
Here's another piece, dude. I don't know why I just thought of this, and there's probably people out there gonna be like, why the hell did you connect the dots here? But like for me, it's taken a lot of wisdom and watching myself change, right? And I'll give you an example that you can resonate with, right? Like a long time ago, I told myself I would never own a Harley, right? I would always just own a sports bike. And then you got a Harley, right? Why? So I thought about that the other day. I said, why did I change? What's important to me now wasn't important to me then, right? And that was comfort, that's injury, right? Stuff like that I've got going on personally and physically. But then the other side of it was like, we stop doing things because we don't get that instant reaction. But like when I look at the workout game, for example, like my bench press has increased 40% since I started, right? But it's taken me a while to get here because you have to progressively increase your weight over time so you can do it safely without creating injury. And that's been the biggest thing for me, is like I was scared to get injured in the workout process because I did get injured a lot when I played sports, and that's just stretching and overexertion and not properly planning. That's why I got hurt, right? I just did stupid things and I didn't prepare myself. There was no workout regimen, right? So when you start looking at like certain things that I wanted to do from a workout perspective, I'm like, okay, like I want to learn how to do a massive amount of pull-ups, but one can't just start doing pull-ups. And it'd be extremely tough if you couldn't do a pull-up today and you're like, I'm going to do pull-ups. And depending on how much weight and how much body mass you've got from a muscle perspective, maybe you could do a couple, right? But if you had a goal in mind, if you go research what muscles allow you to do pull-ups more effectively, it requires a strategy. And there's like 6 other workouts that create the support muscles for you to start doing pull-ups, right? So for some of us, like we don't dive in, like we just try something, it doesn't work, and we don't go anything past that because we don't get a desired result quickly. But like you have to build up foundations for that shit, man. And for me, I finally look at the workout strategy and I'm like, damn, dude, it took me forever to increase my bench press by 40%, right? Like I had to think through it. I had to add, 2.5 pounds at a time because I didn't want to injure myself and overexert my muscles, right? And then I researched it and I finally said like, oh shit, like it's natural. Mentally, from a social media perspective, I assume that I could go pretty quickly, but like it's natural for you to only increase your weight by 5% at a time because of what needs to be developed in order to maintain that. So I just think some of us have unrealistic expectations. And I'll say it again. I said it when we opened up this conversation. We have too many unrealistic expectations. And it's only furthering due to social media and due to things that are right in front of our eyes, TV, shit like that. We just don't give ourselves time to develop the core foundations that we need to reach the end goals that we want. And we give up on them. Right. So
everything's like that. Everything. It's easy to understand it from the physical perspective because we're all humans. We all move. We all have a basis, a foundation. But everything works that way. Everything.
Work, professional, personal, relationships. And then you have the outside world telling you differently, right? And it's hard for us to unsee that shit.
It is. It's just like absolutely crazy because when it comes to you go from one job to another. Right. And this is just, even if it's the same type of business, right? You go from one work to another. So you're going to go from your leadership role to a leadership role in another company, right? Everything is the same technically on paper, but in reality, there are nuances to that new business, right? You can work at one restaurant and be a server at a restaurant, go to a different restaurant and also be a server. Essentially, you're doing the same thing, but you have to learn the menu's different, the conversation, the type of customer that walks in there, what each customer wants. Like you can be a server at IHOP or you can be a server at, let's say, like Maggiano's, which is an Italian restaurant. And technically, it's the same thing on paper, but in reality, they're 2 different worlds with 2 different sets of requirements, with 2 different sets of mentalities, 2 different sets of customers, like 2 completely different planets. And it's the same thing, right? So you have to build the nuance to that very one specific thing. In this case, from your example, it was a chest exercise. Nice.
You might as well just go ahead and end it now because my thing just died, I think. Hold on.
Well, either way, it was a chest exercise, right? So when it comes down to it, whatever it is that you're doing, it takes a level of nuance. It takes time to develop. And that is something that I can't say that I know, right? Because I'm still eager to do stuff and I still have that, I want to get it done now. But I've accepted the fact that shit's just going to take a long time. And it doesn't have to, but it more than likely will, right? So if I can see it happening faster, it happens. And I'm thankful for when things happen quickly or when outcomes are achieved quickly. But I'm also very, very focused on not being distraught when they don't happen super duper quick, because in reality, nothing really does.